Hey everyone, and welcome to Almost Cancelled. I am Peter, and I'm going to be talking about The Haunting of Hill House Season 1, Episode 8. It's called Witness Marks. So, full spoilers for the episode, as always. I'm going to start this off by saying there's a jump scare in this episode that has got me the best a jump scare has gotten me in quite a while. I think, as much as there's an art to the build up to a jump scare, when you know one's coming, you're just kind of anticipating it. There is also an art to doing the completely out of nowhere one that is not built up to at all. It's just it happens. But what's really neat about the one that happens in this is that there is build up to it. It's just not build up that you expect for a jump scare. It's build up emotionally. It's build up in the heated discussion that's happening, and then there's a jump scare. And all of a sudden it completely changes the tone of the scene. Very good. There's a couple of good little ones in this actually, but there's one in particular in the car with Shirley and Theo that that really just came out of nowhere and was very effective. But things feel like they're ramping up now. If I would describe this episode as the journey to the house. I was correct last time about Theo. Sorry, not about Theo. About Luke going to the house. That's where he was heading. And they get to that realization about halfway through, because they go off looking. Shirley gets a credit card company to text her when it's used to know when it's where he is, and Stephen and Hugh go looking for Luke at the drug hangouts, where people buy heroin in the city, which they know because when he lived here briefly with Shirley, they knew where they ended up finding him in past occasions. So, worth mentioning that Theo says to her dad, "Hey, we're not going to tell anyone what we just saw." She brings it up, and he kind of basically, he doesn't say no, but he basically insinuates no. And it's like, okay, so this is kind of a pattern with him about hiding things. He doesn't know how to bring these things up. But he's probably not expecting anyone to believe him as the conversation kind of goes, because the episode from here kind of boils down to a couple of key setups. We have Stephen and Hugh in one car, looking for Luke, and then eventually once they realise that he's on the way to Hill House. In fact, one of my favourite moments of this episode is when Shirley gets the text from the credit card company and she calls Stephen to tell him, where he is, and it's a gas station on this road. The way she hesitates when she tries to tell Stephen what that's on the way to, because she's like, oh, that's on the way to, and Stephen kind of cuts her off and says, I know, but she kind of quivers, her voice quivers as she's saying it, and I think it's interesting that Shirley, who is very much a skeptical character out of the siblings, is terrified of the thought of going to that house. Despite the fact that she's always, played the skeptic, she's always said these things aren't real. She is terrified of the thought of going there, of anyone going there. And at this point, they're still thinking they're thinking he's going to commit suicide. They're thinking that's what he's going to do. Until of course they get to the gas station later and realise that he bought a lot of gas and a lot of cans to potentially burn the house down. But we have that. We have Shirley on her own, and then it's eventually Shirley and Theo, which leads to them in the car as well, because they are, even though their dad's told them to stay behind, they're going to the house too. And so I'll tackle Shirley and Theo first. I really like their stuff. Shirley's stuff, because it's Halloween night, and I'll point out that our son was wearing a Daredevil costume, but it was the cheap and easy Daredevil costume from season 1 of the Netflix show, as opposed to your more traditional red, horned suit. And she's left on her own, and she's looking at the house. And I think something clocked in this episode. Actually, it clicked for me that the model house she had, I think, was the dream house that her mum had designed. That that her parents wanted to move into at some point. I think she built a little model of it because it was next to a photo of her mum, and it clicked to me that that's what that probably was in the room. But maybe even a model that her mum herself built back when she designed it. Maybe that's possible. They don't look that old, but I mean, it could have been. If you keep it clean, I suppose it could be it. But point being, is she's tidying that up, and there keeps being the doorbell. Even though she's turned the porch light off, there keeps being the bell keeps going, and the door gets knocked, and there's no one there. It happens a couple of times, and then eventually she shouts, and Theo's outside, coming up, and she wants to talk to her about the thing that happened with her husband, and try and clear the air. And at least, you know, the confrontation kind of starts. She tries to talk to her about it, and we get a very comical scene where she punches her in the boob, and she then comments, "Did you just punch me in the boob?" And she's like, "Yeah, you try to kiss my husband, so yeah, I punched you in the boob. That's what you get, a punch in the boob." Which was actually, I thought that was a really neat scene, or a really neat moment of levity, and a scene that's a very tense conversation about something that's happened that's kind of splitting them apart. It was a very funny little moment, and a show that, well, it's had a few comedy scenes. It's not, you know, it's a horror show. This has been very serious most of the time. But this is a great little sequence here, though, because the door goes again, and then it switches from the doorbell to knocking. And Shirley slowly goes up. She just throws the door open, because it's worth mentioning the door she's opening, because it's a funeral home and it's kind of her house, but it's also an actual funeral place. It's you know, it's one of those doors where it's like, you know, most public buildings of some kind. I shouldn't say public, but you know, any kind of building where people, you know, go. You get schools, swimming pools, concert halls, whatever. Take your pick, anything. The big exit sort of bars in the door, the big bar handle, the ones that you can always open from the inside but not necessarily from the outside, is typically how they're designed. So you can always get out in case of a fire emergency, but you can't just come sauntering in no matter what. You can still lock it so that it can't be opened from the other side. So she throws that open, she just pushes it open, and there's no one there. And then as soon as it swings shut, it starts banging again. As if, wait a minute, you know, like, we just saw outside, no one's there. And then it moves to the window, and someone's banging on the window, but you can actually clearly see the window. Like, you can clearly see through it. There's no one there, but it's banging. And they're terrified. And it ends with the text from the credit card company. But it's a really well done scene. In fact, one of the little filmmaking touches that I want to point out at the start of this scene, when they're having their fight, when Theo was trying to like talk to her about the kiss and what was happening, the camera work does something very interesting here. It's very frantic the way it cuts around. Like, you obviously have complimented some scenes in this show for staying on one shot or doing long takes. This was the opposite. This was jumping around very erratically. So erratic, in fact, that it crossed the line multiple times. I've explained this before in other reviews, but just so you know what I mean by this, crossing the line, or sometimes it's referred to as the 180-degree rule. Although I was taught it as crossing the line, is the idea that typically in a scene where you've got two people talking to each other, you always stay in the same side of the people. The other example I always use, if you're watching a sports game, imagine you're watching basketball or football or whatever, the cameras are always on the same side of the field. They never, or the court or whatever, they never switch to the other side because it's confusing. You never just cut to the other side of the two actors, right? Because it's really weird and abrupt. And you can do it occasionally, like for effect, because it has an effect to it, but you don't generally do it. It's a rule because it feels weird. And so unless you want it to feel weird or abrupt, you don't do it. You can do it in a shot. You can move if you're moving 360 around a person, like, it's fine because in the shot you're actually showing the movement, so it's not confusing in that sense. But if you cut to it, if you do an edit to the other side, it feels abrupt. It feels weird because all of a sudden the actors are on the opposite sides. Because if you're viewing people from left to right, and then you cut to the other side, the person who was on the left is now on the right. It's just simple, mechanics. This, not only did it cross the line, particularly on Theo's side of the scene, it crossed the line with almost the exact same shot just from the other side. And that was really weird. It was almost like there was a mistake. It felt really strange because it was like someone just took the image and flipped it in post. And it wasn't that. It did cross the line. But that's what it felt like almost, the way it cut. It didn't cut straight to it. It was on Theo, it cut to Shirley, and when it cut back to Theo, it was the flipped version where the camera's on the other side. And then it went into a close-up, it flipped back, and it was going back and forth. And I just thought it was interesting how frantic it made the scene feel. And I think it was really to get into the headspace of both characters, where one of them is begging for forgiveness and wants to make it clear what happened and is terrified that she's losing her sister over this. And the other one is, full of rage and thinks her family's falling apart because her sister and her husband were up to something. And of course this all bubbles over through their entire sequences where they're driving towards the house. She's already at this point kind of got out the idea that she made a move on him, and it wasn't his fault. He tried to push her away immediately, and that's when Shirley came in. But it all bubbles up to the big scare where they're fighting in the car, and that's when Ghost Nell just jumps out from the back seat, and it is a really great moment. And it's great because Theo, accepting these kind of things are happening, is terrified because she understands what it is, whereas Shirley's just sit there in awe, and she takes a while to get out of the car, and she comes over, and Theo is like screaming at her, you know what that was, you saw that was Nell. And I touched, because in the car she brought up she touched Nell's body. She was trying to like explain what had happened, and Shirley just gives her shit, like, what are you, that's weird, why would you do that, basically. I mean, it wasn't in those words obviously, but that was the summation of the idea. But they're in this field where they've driven off road, and she yells that she touched Nell's body, and obviously I was very curious as to what she saw because her reaction was so visceral. And at first she just says she saw nothing, and I was like, that was a bit of a tough reaction for nothing. And then she keeps going, says, no, it was like nothing, it was like a black hole, and then it consumed me, and then I could feel nothing. And it was this idea that there's just, nothing after death, it's just a bottomless pit. And it's got to the point where she just didn't feel anything anymore. She felt cold, or not even felt cold, she just felt nothing. She felt complete apathy and emptiness. And she continued to feel like that. She felt that at the funeral, she felt that throughout the whole thing. And when the lights went out, she explains that her husband was just, Kevin was just like a light. He was just like a beacon of light to get back to humanity. She didn't see him. That's what she keeps saying, that. I didn't see him specifically. I just saw someone. And she says, I'm glad I did it because it worked. She's heartbroken that she's put her sister through this. And she even says at one point, you're the only sister I've got left. I don't want to lose you. But she's happy she did it because it worked, and now she feels things again. She feels, and it's funny. I think thinking back to how she was acting throughout, like up until that kiss, or the almost kiss, if you will. I think up until that point, yeah, she was very kind of distant and cold, and it's since that moment where she had that heart-to-heart with her dad, it's since that moment where she's been trying to beg Shirley for forgiveness. Like there has been a lot more emotion from her, and it paints that scene where her girlfriend came over in a different light, or not in a different light, but it adds more context to it, where now I understand better why she called her girlfriend, why she tried to connect with someone, but she points out that it didn't work. It wasn't until that moment with him that it worked. And she had feelings again. So she's terrified that that's what it's like when you die. She's terrified of all these things. And I love that she shouts out that, hey, Shirley, you've not been able to admit it, but you deep down, you knew what happens when I touch someone. You know why I wear these gloves. And I think that's interesting. Because I think it kind of does a neat symmetry thing with both car rides, where they both have someone try to convince the other that these things are real. And, the first half of the Steve and Hugh car ride is very much Stephen telling Hugh that they're all ill, and the reason why his wife separated them is because he got a vasectomy right after college because he didn't want to pass on his mental illness to anyone and didn't tell her. And, of course, there's a flashback of them going to see a doctor because they've been trying to get pregnant, and he has to... First of all, he sees his mum through the stained glass, of course, just for the creepiness, but... he has to tell her that he got a vasectomy and that's why they've been separated. And there's some stuff about, his dad trying to tell him to patch things up, and how him and his mother separated for a little bit, and how... I particularly liked how he described their fighting, where after that they'd fight in love, where, they'd be fighting, but they'd always be on the same team, so that they never felt like there was a danger of it going anywhere or meaning more than it did, and how there was a comfort in that. And I thought that was kind of sweet. This show has been sweet at times, it really has been. And I think Theo's monologue as well in the rain, which as she's like screaming her heart out, like, admitting all this stuff and trying to make all this stuff clear and crying, I like how the reverse shot of Shirley is very static, and she is just completely standing there trying to take it all in. And it's just, the single tear going down the face as she's standing there completely still, just listening to what she's saying. I like that. But it's after they get to the gas station and they realise what Luke's going to be doing that Hugh insists he drives, and he says, right, shut up, Stephen, you want to know some stuff? Okay, let's get to this. Because of the first half of the car ride, Stephen flat out brings up the bruises that their mother had, that Olivia had, the what was the other thing, the back of the head, as if she'd been slammed against a wall. flat out kind of accusing him of things and saying, like, you never got her help. You never got her help. You left her there, and you shouldn't have left her there. And it's on the second half of the car ride where he says, look, you have to start to understand this. That this family is like an unfinished meal to that house. And they've already got two of us. Might be Luke next, and we have to save him. This is the most dangerous place ever. And then what's very neat here is he brings up some stuff, because he's read his book, and he brings up some stuff that to him proves that Stephen did see ghost things and has just not processed it correctly. And because that's actually one of the flashbacks we get in this episode, where he sees this clock maker, this clock repairman, working on this old grandfather clock in the hall as he's moving around. And he brings up, oh yeah, in chapter 19 you mentioned this clock repairman, and he's like, yeah, there was a guy there, and you can kind of see where it's going as soon as he starts talking about it. But he says that no, like that the name of the episode is called Witness Marks. You know, it's like these old clocks that you can only tell how to operate them because you can check, where they've already been, fixed before. You can see the scratches inside of where gears have been taken out and things like that. There's no actual concrete plans, and you have to have an expert look at it and deduce, okay, this is how you fix it. And he had that clock checked, and because it would take like one of like a few experts in the world who they couldn't just come in to fix it, he knew for a fact he never hired anyone to do that. So that was not a person who was there. And Stephen kind of disputes that. And then he brings up the treehouse. He's like, there was no treehouse. He's like, yes, there was a treehouse. No, there wasn't. We were only there for a short period of time. We were going to flip the house. Why would I have spent time building it? When did you think I had time to build a treehouse? And Stephen's not got an answer. He's not got an answer for this. And he's like, you can look when we get there, but there was no treehouse. And it's interesting. It's interesting to have someone finally like give Stephen something that makes him go quiet, right? That shuts him up. And even if he doesn't believe it yet, he doesn't have an answer for what he's saying. And that was kind of because Stephen is a bit of a dick, right? He's the one who's probably the most frustrating in terms of his attitude. Because I think Shirley, obviously she's very standoffish, but she's not as frustrating in a confrontational way, the way Stephen is, I don't think. But no, so I enjoyed that. I enjoyed him finally almost sticking up for himself, Hugh. Pure Hugh, who's been taking all this shit every time he runs into his kids this season. I really liked him sticking up for himself and saying, no, here's some evidence, here's some facts. And obviously there's still more to discover, there's still more to find out what's going on. But that's there. And of course the episode ends with Luke arriving there and the entire house lights up. And he goes in and he's sitting, putting all the gas around, all the gasoline, and he tries to set it on fire and it just doesn't work. It does that like sort of like quick blue wave as if it's going to, as if it is spreading like fire, but then that's it. It's gone. And then of course the ghost behind him, he sees his mom up in the stairs, and then the ghost behind him grabs him, who I believe is Poppy Hill, who we learn about in one of the flashbacks in this episode, because the flashbacks in this episode are Stephen's experiences with noticing that his mother was getting sick, that she was going, ill or crazy or whatever, and he finds out that she's going away because she's been cooped up in the house, and he's playing his Sega Mega Drive, or Sega Genesis for the colonials, but he's playing his Sega Mega Drive, and he gets this idea, this old cabinet, this old dresser with the mirror and that. He said, I'm going to fix this up. I'm going to paint this and give it to my mum as a present. And he goes to Mrs. Dudley to ask for paint and things like that. And he's got permission from his dad. If it's not marked for sale, then he can do whatever he wants with it. And they open the drawer and they find this photo of this Poppy Hill, who is William Hill's wife, who I would assume was the son of Hazel Hill. I'm making a leap there. I would assume that's the case though. But this ghost at the end seemingly was her. It looked like her. It looked like Poppy. But we find out that she was insane. She was actually insane in real life, as was William. William met her in an insane asylum, and they fell in love, as you do. What a love story. Starting to sound like Legion, the X-Men show. But no, they fell in love, and Mrs. Dudley did meet her when she was older, but still crazy. And so I was like, okay, we're getting more of these family members. Clearly this family is very important to this house. And it makes me wonder, was the house already haunted and it already fed in this family like the Crane family are now? Or are the Hill family what's haunting the house? Is what happened to them what created the hauntings? And it's that family that are primarily causing all the chaos. I don't know, but it's interesting. And where does Abigail fit in? Is Abigail's is that the unborn child? Is that this crazy Poppy's kid? I don't know. I'm looking forward to finding out though. We got 2 episodes left, and we got all this to go. But of course, it's worth mentioning. Probably one of my favourite scenes of the episode as well is where he gives the dresser to his mother, and she loves it. And then she sort of blanks out and then smashes it. She punches the mirror. And it's like he is terrified. He's backing away in fear because like the adult's freaking out and not acting. It's one of those things where that's scary. If you're an adult and another adult does that, it's scary because okay, you understand what this means. I think for a kid, even though he likes to act older than the other kids, I think for a kid that is terrifying to watch your parent. Your parent to sort of break down like that, to feel like you can't trust them to take care of you anymore at that age. In fact, that reminds me, I really like the transition at the start where Hugh says to Stephen, "I just want to help," and that cuts to young Stephen saying to Hugh, "I just want to help about the house." I thought that was a nice little transition, and how they've kind of flipped places in the 30 years that have passed, or the 20 years that have passed rather. So I thought that was a really neat touch. But no, I really like this episode. I think this was another strong one. I think this is up with... I don't know if I'd say it's as good as 5 and 6, but if it's not with them, it's the next one on the list, I think. I think the emotional payoff we're getting for a lot of the stuff they've been building up to. I loved everything with Theo and Shirley pretty much, and the flashbacks were really good. I loved Hugh sticking up for himself and, finally sort of starting to get to some of the answers and just flat out saying how dangerous the house is and why, we still don't have a complete context for how he distanced himself from them or what he believed was why he had to be separate from them, but we're getting to more concrete details on that and how adamant he believed that this was all to keep them away from the house and how that was really important. So I'm looking forward to the conclusion now. We've got 2 episodes left, and we feel that we're swinging into the end game here. So I'm expecting everyone else to arrive at the house in episode 9, and who knows what chaos we'll get. And I'm liking how slowly we've been building up the Hill family. We've learned about one member of the Hill family. I think out of the last 3 or 4 episodes, we've learned about 3 members of the family, one by one. We've learned about William Hill, who bricked himself in the wall. We've learned about Poppy, and we've learned about Hazel, and to an extent Jacqueline, who was her daughter. That was over the last few episodes. We've learned about one in each, give or take. So I like how slowly we're sort of building up this family. I'm almost expecting a big ghost shot at some point with the whole family together. One happy dead family. But we'll see. So no, that's episode 8. It was very bloody good. Payoffs, people. Payoffs are good. Scary moments are also good. Nice tension. Nice tension with all the door banging and, of course, probably the best jump scare of the entire show, quite frankly, in the car. It's really good. I like the idea that Nell is with them. That Nell is with them and almost trying to warn them. It's almost like she was trying to run them off the road to keep them from going to the house because she knows it's dangerous for them. So I'm excited to see how they finally do this. I'm excited for Steve to finally get scared shitless by a ghost and believe that it's a ghost, believe that they're up shit creek. And I'm fully expecting old Hugh, poor Hugh, to probably die saving his children. He'll let the house take him to let his kids go, and they'll all do a run for it. Maybe, I don't know. I'm just predicting things now. But that is me for episode 8. I will see you guys next time for episode 9. Let me know what you think of this one in the comments below. Like, subscribe, all the usual stuff. Get us on the Twitters at mailed_fudge for channel updates. Support us over at patreon.com/mailedfuzztv. Very important, and we appreciate it loads if you go over there. You get to feel warm and fuzzy in the inside, and you get some stuff early, some bonuses, and so on and so on. But go have a look. But otherwise, that is me. That has been this discussion of episode 8. So thank you very much once again for watching and listening. Always appreciate it. Keep watching TV, guys. I'll see you next time. Have you got any vanilla?